After 7 years of loyalty, I revealed a shocking truth that exposed his unexpected betrayal. Melissa felt a knot of dread settle in her stomach as she scrutinized the documents piled before her. How could Dr. Stevens, her mentor, the respected physician of Bridgewater, be complicit in such vile conduct? The air in the nurses' break room was thick with secrets, every exhalation tinged by the weight of her imminent choice. She remembered when he had guided her through her earliest shifts, how his words nurtured her resolve to be a beacon of hope. But now, betrayal seeped through the cracks of her admiration, intertwining guilt and disgust into an unbearable mix. Thoughts raced through her mind, each more tormenting than the last. Should she confront him? The consequences loomed like dark shadows, thickening on the edges of her consciousness. She could almost hear the whispers from her coworkers, gasping disbelief. Melissa? She turned on Dr. Stevens? The thought made her stomach churn. For years, he had embodied integrity, a paragon of virtue. How could she reconcile that image with the remnants of trust that now fluttered like torn pages in the wind? As she paced her tiny apartment that night, the glow from her desk lamp seemed to mock her isolation. Patients depended on her, but was it fair to turn a blind eye? What if the donations they offered to recover their health had vanished on false promises? Each question carved deeper into her heart, a relentless urge to protect those who had always shown her gratitude. The walls felt like they were closing in, each tick of the clock an echo of her escalating anxiety. She could almost see the patients looking up at her, waiting for guidance she might not be able to give them. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue, but the pressure only intensified. Each day grew heavier as she uncovered more layers of corruption. Members of the administration turned a blind eye, murmuring half-hearted justifications that sounded hollow even in the dark recesses of her mind. What would she say at board meetings, with doubts simmering beneath the surface? They might dismiss her, label her a paranoid naysayer before they ever questioned the faith they had placed in Dr. Stevens. The thought of facing her fellow nurses, especially her closest friend, paralyzed her. How could they accept her now, tainted by the grotesque truths she had unearthed? The world kept spinning as she stood still, gripped by the impending storm. Tension bubbled beneath her skin, igniting memories of laughter shared in the hallway, of hope given freely to all those who entered. And for a fleeting moment, doubt pierced her thoughts, reverberating. What if I'm not brave enough? The very essence of her being felt at odds, trapped between an allegiance to her mentor and an undeniable obligation to those whom they were meant to serve. The cusp of revelation felt heavy and dark. Each choice ahead mirrored the late hours spent in shadowy hallway corners, weighed down by uncertainty. With board meetings looming and colleagues whispering, the clock ticked toward her moment of reckoning. She stood at a precipice, fear scratching at her heels, heart racing with dread. Everything she held dear threatened to unravel as the light of truth met the obscure depths of betrayal, leaving her to confront the unavoidable question: which path would she choose? The morning air was sharper than usual as Melissa arrived at the hospital, a faint chill mingling with the anxiety that coursed through her veins. She drew a deep breath, the sterile scent of antiseptic mingling with the warm aroma of coffee from the break room. Each step felt like a test of her resolve, the weight of the previous night's revelations pressing down harder than the clogs on her feet. The shadow of Dr. Stevens loomed large over the corridors, a ghost that haunted her every thought. As she navigated the bustling halls, she felt the stares of her colleagues' momentary glances punctuated by hushed conversations. Were they whispering about her? Or was it the scandal brewing within their very institutions that had turned their heads? Each breath was more controlled than the last, and she could feel the instinct to flee tugging at her. She spent the first half of her shift on autopilot, checking in on patients with hollow pleasantries that masked her internal turmoil. Every time she heard laughter echoing from break rooms, It carved deeper into her unease, a reminder of the carefree bond she had once shared with her peers and of the vault of trust built over years, now on the verge of collapse. Then came the moment that heralded the impending confrontation. The notification for the board meeting flashed across her phone screen. Time to gather evidence, to stand up, to resist complacency. It was both an invitation and a summons, a challenge to face her fears head-on. With shaky fingers, she scrolled through the findings she had compiled, each document igniting her determination further. If she couldn't speak out, how could she expect her patients to trust her? Wouldn't silence compound the darkness of the betrayal? As doubts flickered in and out, she instinctively reached for her phone, falling victim to a wave of distraction. Messages blinked with the outside world, the allure of normalcy enticing yet futile. She locked her phone, clenching it hard enough to leave an imprint in her palm. Melissa's mind shifted to her friend Amy, whose unwavering support had always provided a sanctuary against chaos. The thought of potential fallout weighed heavily on her conscience. Could she navigate this storm without losing Amy in the process? Losing one friendship to save countless others felt like an assiduous burden. Yet this was more than just personal. This was about preserving integrity, revealing a reality that threatened the vulnerable. As her shift drew to a close, Melissa sat alone in an empty room. The subsequent silence created space for clarity. Each tick of the clock urged her into deeper introspection. Would she be remembered for her silence, or for finding her voice amid discomfort? Recognition of her own capacity for bravery settled within her, knitting together pieces of the uncertainty that had unraveled her for too long. Suddenly, the door swung open, revealing Amy, concern etched across her features. "I've heard whispers, Mel. You're not thinking of going against Dr. Stevens, are you?" The question lingered, and in that moment, the tension crystallized. "I might have to, Amy." This newfound determination surged forth, raw and real. Melissa realized this was not solely about betrayal. It was a pivotal juncture in her own development. She was no longer just a nurse shadowed by doubt, she was a force of change. She could see the path before her, daunting yet liberating. In that moment, clarity crystallized, her professional identity ready to face the storm head-on. With a deep breath, she met her friend's eyes, steeling herself. The time had come to face what I had discovered. I couldn't remain a silent observer any longer. As they stood together, the looming board meeting on the horizon transformed into more than just a challenge. It represented a chance to redefine everything she believed in. The final sense of urgency emerged. She had the truth, and now it was her responsibility to wield it. What she didn't know was how the revelation would tear through fragile alliances, fracturing the very fabric of her career. Would she emerge unscathed from the volatile repercussions awaiting her? The day wore on with an oppressive weight, each passing hour punctuated by her own racing thoughts. Melissa moved through the wards, her mind a labyrinth of possibilities, grappling with the risks and ramifications of her impending decision. The reflection of the hospital lights caught her unsteady hand as she prepped medications, reminding her of the burning resolve festering within. Everyone around her remained blissfully ignorant, their laughter and light banter acting as a veil over the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. Her encounter with Amy had served as a catalyst, stirring the dormant courage she had buried under layers of worry. Yet even as she felt emboldened, an unsettling fear slithered beneath her composure. Was she truly ready to confront Dr. Stevens? The thought of his piercing gaze and the authority it commanded sent chills up her spine. She had been trained to respect hierarchy, to trust her superiors blindly. To challenge him seemed both reckless and necessary, a paradox that twisted her stomach in knots. As she set down the last dose of medication, her resolve steeled further. She couldn't allow fear to dictate her actions anymore. If she were to shed the weight of complacency, she had to begin with herself. The nurses who depended on her, whose patients would benefit from her advocacy, fueled her burning desire for change. Their collective vulnerability stared her down, imploring her to rise above the anxieties that had, until now, held her captive. The board meeting loomed just beyond her last shift, an unnerving spectacle she felt wholly unequipped to navigate. She made her way towards the staff lounge, seeking solace among her colleagues. Yet, as she stepped inside, the laughter and chatter slipped away, like a tide receding from the shoreline. Conversations hesitated at her entrance, eyes flicked toward her, then quickly darted away as if diverting suspicion. The air thickened with tension. "Did you hear what happened with Dr. Stevens?" one nurse whispered to another, her words laden with a mixture of intrigue and fear. Melissa paused, the words slicing through her thoughts. Thoughts of the hidden truths of deceit tangled within their professional lives hung in the air, heavy and palpable. She felt the urge to interject, to ask what they knew, but the fear of exposing herself kept her paralyzed. The clock's ticking also mocked her in that moment, time slipping away too quickly, beckoning her towards the inevitable confrontation. Then, a sound broke through the oppressive atmosphere, a light tap on the doorframe. Melissa turned, meeting the glance of a fellow nurse, John, who had always seemed balanced and steady, like an anchor in storms. "Hey, Mel. Everything okay?" His concern washed over her, lending her a fleeting sense of reassurance. "Not yet, but it will be," she managed, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. With an unexpected intentionality, she took a step closer to John. "Have you heard anything about the board meeting? I'm concerned about the direction the hospital is heading." John's brows knitted together, a depth of thought reflecting in his gaze. "I have. But I wouldn't let it get under your skin. Just do your job. You know how things can get here." Melissa felt anger spark within her, a roiling surge. "But what about the patients? Don't they deserve more than what we're giving them? We can't just stay silent." John shrugged, perhaps not fully understanding the gravity of her words, that they were born from a reality she could not ignore anymore. "It's complicated." Complicated. That had been a word she had too often recited to justify her inaction, but not anymore. That single thought ignited something deeper inside her, a flame growing beyond any previous hesitation. Complicated or not, she had to face the truth. "John," she whispered, determination anchoring her resolve. "I can't just stand by anymore. I need to speak up." As his eyes widened in surprise, she caught the glimmer of understanding reflected back at her. The walls of her complacency began to crack, revealing the strength she never knew she possessed. Just then, as if fate itself conspired against her fresh resolve, a heavy buzz echoed through the hospital, followed by an urgent announcement over the intercom, pulling her into the present moment. "Attention all staff, a meeting has been called in the main conference room. All personnel must attend." The precision of that reminder sent a sharp jolt through her, an ultimatum urging immediate action. Would she rise and meet this challenge head-on, or would she cower back into the shadows cast by Dr. Stevens? The choice lay before her, a crucible that would seal her fate. With a steely breath, Melissa slipped from the lounge, pushing through the double doors of uncertainty toward a future that awaited her. Confrontation loomed, and she felt the unmistakable pull of destiny tugging at her sleeves, driving her forward. All eyes would soon be on her, but more importantly, she needed to be on herself, unmasked and fierce. As she approached the door to the conference room, her heart thrummed with intensity. She hadn't yet grasped the full scope of what lay ahead, but she was ready to confront the truth in whatever form it presented itself. The moment of truth approached, chaos simmering just beneath the surface. Would she embrace the storm, or let it swallow her whole? As Melissa stepped into the conference room, the air felt electric, charged with the weight of unspoken words and hidden agendas. The usual chatter had been replaced by an unsettling silence, as if everyone sensed the shift about to take place. Rows of chairs were neatly arranged in anticipation of the unknown, and Melissa's gaze swept over the faces before her, searching for signs of solidarity. Instead, she found only uncertainty reflected back. Dr. Stevens stood at the front, his imposing figure commanding immediate attention. His presence alone stirred a mix of admiration and apprehension within her. This was the man she had respected, perhaps too blindly, for far too long. He was the embodiment of all authority, and in this moment, he felt towering and insurmountable. Taking a deep breath, Melissa settled into a chair at the periphery. The humming of the overhead lights seemed to match the pulse in her ears, quickening as the meeting commenced. She could hear fragments of conversation, snippets of discussions on budgets, new protocols, and the challenges ahead. Yet the gravity of her personal decision overshadowed these mundane topics. Her resolve simmered, pushing back the fear that threatened to envelop her. She swallowed hard, replaying the conversation with John in her mind. "I can't just stand by anymore." Those words echoed like a drumbeat, guiding her toward the precipice. It was time to speak up and claim the narrative for herself. As minutes dragged on, Dr. Stevens began to address the room. His tone was eloquent, filled with reassurances meant to pacify the growing unrest among the staff. Yet deep down, she could sense the underlying tensions, the whispers of discontent hidden in polite nods and forced smiles. And then, with an acute sense of urgency, Melissa interjected. "Dr. Stevens." Her voice was steady, but inside, her heart raced. Eyes turned sharply towards her, a mixture of surprise and curiosity rippling through the attendees. She felt like a spotlight had been cast solely on her, illuminating every flaw and uncertainty. But there was no room for doubt now. "I believe we need to address the growing concerns regarding patient care and staffing issues that have been brushed aside for too long." A flicker of annoyance crossed Dr. Stevens' face, but behind it, she sensed the faintest pulse of vulnerability. "This isn't the time, Melissa. We are here to discuss future plans, not to dig into issues that no," she interrupted, her courage amplifying as she pressed forward. "It is exactly the right time. We can't plan for the future when the present is crumbling beneath us." Her words rang out, hanging in the air like a challenge. Silence enveloped the room, thick and palpable. She felt the collective breath of her colleagues, each one contemplating their own stakes in the matter. "Are you suggesting we sacrifice progress in the name of petty grievances?" Dr. Stevens snapped back, his authoritative demeanor resurfacing. "Hardly," she replied, meeting his gaze head-on. The intensity of the moment surged, igniting a fire within her that she had long suppressed. "But pretending everything is fine while staff are overwhelmed and patients suffer is just as detrimental. It is my responsibility, as a nurse, to advocate for my patients and colleagues. This matters, their voices matter." Melissa's heart raced as she sensed the tide shifting among the staff. A flicker of hope sparked in a few eyes, mingled with anguish and fervor. She wasn't just voicing her concerns, she was vocalizing shared fears that had long been buried under the weight of compliance. "Melissa," Dr. Stevens returned, his tone laced with condescension, "you've always been a good soldier. Perhaps it's time to remember your role." But she dismissed his words, feeling a bracing clarity wash over her. "If that role means accepting the status quo while my colleagues and patients suffer, then I will refuse it outright. I am more than a soldier. I am a nurse, and I want a better future for us all." As she spoke, she could see the subtle nods from behind her, the hesitance ebbing away. They were ready to stand with her. They were beginning to gather their own strength. The tension in the room thickened as Dr. Stevens narrowed his eyes, evaluating the growing dissent. For a brief moment, fear flickered within her, countered by the knowledge that she was no longer alone in this fight. As she held her ground against his scrutiny, the stakes silently rose. She was pushing against a fortress built on long-standing traditions, but she sensed the cracks emerging, and with that realization came another rush of energy and invigorating clarity that silenced the whisperings of doubt. The world outside might be complex, fraught with challenges that seemed daunting, but she was armed with newfound resolve. The confrontation was no longer merely about her, it had morphed into a battle for all who felt voiceless in the system. Her future, once dominated by anxiety, now glimmered with hope, brightening her path. As the atmosphere thickened and their eyes shifted toward Dr. Stevens for his retaliation, it was clear that the conflict had only just begun. "Melissa," he finally continued, an edge creeping into his voice, "if you want change, you need to understand the consequences of your actions." The ultimatum hung heavy between them, and Melissa steeled herself, ready to face whatever storm this provoked. Would she stand firm and ready, or would unseen forces pull her under yet again? The waves of uncertainty lapped at her, and she dug in her heels, ready for what lay ahead. The silence in the room was deafening, a void filled with unspoken fears and uncertain alliances. Melissa felt a flush of adrenaline as she stood her ground, her heart pounding louder than ever. Dr. Stevens' eyes bore a mixture of disdain and disbelief, and she realized that the true battle for her personal and professional evolution was about to commence. "How naive you are to think that challenging me will bring about change." His voice dripped with contempt, but Melissa detected a tremor beneath the surface, a hint of insecurity. Perhaps for the first time, she could leverage that uncertainty to fuel a different narrative, one that recognized the power of collective voices over individual authority. "Naive or not, I refuse to stay silent," she replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. The break from her past self was tremulous, but a burgeoning confidence surfaced, urging her forward. This wasn't just a confrontation with Dr. Stevens. It was a confrontation with every hesitation, every fear that had tethered her for years. Around her, a mix of expressions flickered across her colleagues' faces. Some were uncertain, others filled with quiet admiration, and a few brimming with a cautious sense of rebellion. The room was divided, poised at the precipice of change. Eager to shift the dialogue, she turned slightly, addressing the group. "Everyone here knows what is at stake, not just for us as healthcare providers, but for the patients who depend on us." Her voice, once hesitant and unsure, now resonated with clarity and purpose. "We are being stretched thin, and that compromises our ability to deliver the care that makes us proud to be nurses." Dr. Stevens' irritation simmered, yet the tension around him seemed to buzz with a different energy. For years she had absorbed the discouragement of the system, masking her discontent with the guise of compliance. Now, however, she was stepping onto new ground, one that demanded she acknowledge her worth and that of her colleagues. "You may see it as weakness, but I view it as strength," she continued, acutely aware of every eye trained on her. "Every time you ignore our realities, you underestimate our commitment. It's time to support us, not silence us." The ripple of murmured agreements surged, emboldening her spirit. Surveying the room, she caught a few smiles, hesitant but hopeful, igniting a spark of alliance. Together, perhaps they could rewrite the narrative they had lived for far too long under the umbrella of Dr. Stevens' authority. His patience visibly waning, Dr. Stevens stepped forward, his expression sharpening. "You think you can incite a revolt? You are playing a dangerous game, Melissa." Her stomach twisted at the implied threat, but she held steady. This was just another form of manipulation, an effort to draw her back into fear. "Perhaps a dangerous game is necessary," she countered. "Too many have suffered in silence. It's time to advocate authentically, for a system that respects our voices." As the words spilled from her lips, she felt a surge of empowerment. Doubt, once a close companion, flickered like an old candle, dim but not dead. She was entering a crucible, forging the steel of her resolve in the fire of confrontation. The murmur among her colleagues escalated, a swelling tide of solidarity inching closer to realization. Dr. Stevens' demeanor shifted, revealing a fleeting glimpse of concern for the power he wielded and how precarious things had become. "What are you suggesting we do, then?" he challenged, barely masking his own dread. As the moment stretched, she saw an opportunity to turn the tide. Everyone was at a crossroads. This was her chance to present a new vision, one rooted in collaboration rather than compliance. "We must meet to discuss real solutions, support staff, improve care protocols, and create systems that don't just survive but thrive. We need to be involved in the decision-making process." The weight of her proposition settled in the air like a call to arms. Hesitation tangled with eagerness among her peers, but determination had become infectious. She had finally sparked the change that had long been brewing. Dr. Stevens, his mouth set in a firm line, wasn't he prepared for this uprising? "You think they will follow you?" he spat, dismissing her plea. "I think they already are," she asserted, the steely conviction in her voice louder than any of his threats. The room reverberated with unvoiced affirmations, signaling a clear shift. As she locked eyes with her colleagues, Melissa felt a burgeoning sense of self. This wasn't just about one confrontation but a collective journey toward empowerment. Yet, deep in her gut, she sensed a looming resistance from Dr. Stevens. He may have been cornered for now, but she knew retaliation awaited just around the corner. Each step she took felt both liberating and perilous, a delicate dance with the unpredictable tide of professional ethics and personal ambition. The battle for her truth and that of her colleagues had just begun, and yet the outcome remained shrouded in uncertainty. Would she have the fortitude to face the repercussions that lie ahead? As the room pulsed with newfound resolve, she steeled herself for the next confrontation. Melissa's path was clearer than ever, one filled with potential, yet fraught with unknown challenges. The moment had arrived for her to not only confront authority but to also defy it strategically. The question simmered ominously: what next consequence would she be forced to confront in the name of this change she sought? The atmosphere crackled with tension as Melissa stepped away from the confrontation, her mind racing with possibilities. In one decisive moment, she had ignited the air of defiance, but she also felt the weight of impending repercussions press down on her shoulders. The growing solidarity among her colleagues gave her hope, yet a gnawing apprehension lingered about how far Dr. Stevens would go to maintain his grip on the team. The murmurs of agreement still echoed in her ears, but beneath that surface, a firmer resolve was forming. Melissa sought out the quiet spaces within herself, the insecurities that had long held her back, and met them with a willingness to acknowledge that change was risky but necessary. For so long, she had navigated through fear, but fear could no longer be her compass. She turned toward her colleagues, who were still gathering their thoughts, showing that decisive moment was only the beginning. "Take a breath, everyone," she said, trying to encourage them as they stood in reluctant awe. "We've taken the first step, and regardless of what happens next, our voices matter." Their nodding heads fueled her conviction. A few ventured to her side, their expressions marking both uncertainty and excitement. Each face she saw reminded her of the collective struggle they all endured, revealing a tapestry of strength woven from shared experiences. Navigating through the crowd of nurses, she paused to speak with Janet, an older nurse whose wisdom and experience could lend valuable insight. "Janet," she began quietly, her voice steady but soaked with urgency, "we have to come together, share our ideas for this meeting. It can't just be me leading the charge." Janet, whose nurturing demeanor often masked a fierce determination, nodded. "You're right. Let us meet after our shifts. We need a plan." "If we catch them off guard." "Exactly," Melissa interjected, exhilaration building within her. "We have to approach this as a team. We can propose actionable changes backed by data and show them we're serious about improving patient care." As the day progressed, Melissa lightened her internal burden by reframing her perspective toward the looming confrontation. She breathed deeply, channeling her anxiety into focused execution. Each task became an opportunity to assert her change-forward mentality, no longer drifting quietly within the shadows of silence. The tasks she performed became moments of quiet rebellion. However, she understood they were only moving into a storm. That night after their shift, the small group gathered in a conference room, their faces illuminated by the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The flickering bulbs felt symbolic of their fragile hope. Melissa laid out her vision, outlining the need for improvements, strategies, and most importantly, clear, actionable steps. "I want us to present real data. We must show that supporting our staff leads to better patient outcomes," Melissa encouraged, carefully looking around the room. "But we need to present a united front. No one can waver under pressure from Dr. Stevens." Janet and a couple of others exchanged glances, the gravity of their impending confrontation settling among them. It became apparent that this would not only be about policy, it was also about challenging the deep-rooted fears that kept them compliant for too long. As they discussed their plans, Melissa felt her confidence swell. Ideas flowed, and it felt exhilarating to collaborate. Yet, beneath the enthusiasm lingered an unsaid truth. Every spoken word was met with the uncertainty of consequence. What would happen when they put their heads above the parapet? Dr. Stevens would not take this lightly. Just as they began to map out their strategy, the room door swung open with a sharp creak. Dr. Stevens stood there, his silhouette an ominous shadow against the corridor light. "Am I interrupting something?" he asked, a cool edge lacing his voice. The air thickened with disbelief and apprehension, and as everyone froze, Melissa's heart pounded in her chest. This confrontation was not the battle she expected tonight, but one that had now arrived on her doorstep. Would she bend under scrutiny, or would she rise to face this unexpected test? In that moment, she knew the stakes had escalated dramatically. This wouldn't just influence the workplace. It could redefine her entire professional path. The time for decisive action loomed. What would she ultimately decide: surrender in fear or engage in a fight for their shared future? Melissa stood frozen, her throat dry as she gazed at Dr. Stevens, his imposing figure cut sharply against the harsh light of the hallway. In the quiet that enveloped them, her mind raced through a torrent of thoughts, every possible outcome filtered through the narrow lens of her worries. Would he retaliate against her? Would he try to divide the group before they could take a stand? Taking a moment to compose herself, Melissa cleared her throat. "We were just discussing ways to improve our workflow and patient care," she said, her voice measured in an attempt to project calm. The words felt insufficient, but they were all she could muster as Dr. Stevens took a step closer. "Is that so?" he replied, his tone laced with skepticism. "I would have expected more discretion before making such sweeping claims." A tight knot formed in Melissa's stomach, but she reminded herself that this tactic was part of his game. He would try to instill doubt, to frighten them into silence. Feeling the solidarity of her colleagues, each person's presence a subtle reinforcement of her own resolve, she pressed forward. "We are dedicated to providing better outcomes for our patients. I assent that what we all want." Dr. Stevens smirked slightly, a flicker of amusement dancing in his steely gray eyes. "Your enthusiasm is admirable, Melissa, but just remember who holds the power here. A united front can swiftly become a target, and I have no qualms about defending my territory." The air grew thicker, weighing heavily on Melissa's chest. Each word from Dr. Stevens felt like a challenge, a gauntlet thrown at her feet. Her colleagues shifted uncomfortably, their collective anxiety sparking doubts that she quickly sought to extinguish. She couldn't let him see her falter. That would only feed his sense of control. "Unity without fear can create change," she asserted, channeling all the strength she could muster. "We aim to strengthen our department, not threaten it. Empowering our staff is essential for maintaining not just morale, but quality patient care as well." He leaned back slightly, folding his arms. "Interesting. You seem to be under the impression that I haven't already considered these changes you speak of. You would do well to remember your role in this hierarchy." The barrier he constructed rattled her, yet Melissa sensed an undercurrent of desperation in his tone, perhaps a reflection of the threat her determination posed. A tightening adrenaline rush propelled her to take another step, moving beyond fear into conviction. She offered Janet a glance, and saw the unspoken support in her eyes. At that moment, the initial tension shifted subtly within her, transforming anxiety into focus. "I'm aware of our roles, Dr. Stevens, but I believe we can align our goals. But I won't back down from what's right for our team. We deserve to have our concerns heard." His expression hardened, the smile fading. "Watch your tone, Melissa. Such defiance may cost you more than you're willing to lose," he warned, and for a heartbeat, they locked eyes, his piercing, while hers resolved. They were engaged now, locked in a delicate dance of power. "She's right, Dr. Stevens," chimed in Janet, her voice trembling yet surprisingly firm. "It's about our patients. A cohesive and empowered team can massively impact their outcomes." Melissa looked around the small group with renewed hope. The fact that Janet spoke up beside her filled her with determination. Each subtle nod among her colleagues reinforced that they were on the cusp of something significant, a change that transcended their individual fears. "Your confidence is noted, but I advise you to tread carefully," Dr. Stevens warned before stepping back, casting an ominous glance. "Consider the consequences of what you're proposing very thoroughly." With a final wordless exchange, he turned away, leaving the doorway open and the tension hanging like an unresolved question. As the door clicked shut, an unexpected exhilaration coursed through Melissa. They were far from finished, and she had ignited a fire within herself that would not easily be extinguished. This fight stirred the potential she didn't fully understand yet. "What do you think he'll do next?" someone whispered nervously. Melissa felt the weight of leadership settle onto her shoulders. "I don't know," she said honestly. But we've awakened something within ourselves. We have to prepare for whatever comes next. A group like ours has power when it doesn't back down. The flickering lights above cast shadows on their faces, and in that small room, determination solidified amongst them. The stakes had shifted, and Melissa's vision was now broader, clearer, and completely rooted in the idea of taking actionable steps toward change. The realization dawned on her this confrontation was only the beginning of their trial. They were now not just employees. They were a force, and the upcoming meeting would either solidify or shatter that ambition. The moment they faced Dr. Stevens again would determine who they would be moving forward. Would that meeting break them, or redefine their professional identities entirely? The atmosphere in the room was electric, yet a calm resolve had settled over Melissa as her colleagues began to filter out. Each exchanged glance spoke volumes of support and determination, yet she felt the burden of leadership grow heavier on her shoulders. She needed a strategy to prepare her team for the next confrontation. With her mind racing, she moved to a quiet corner of the break room. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a gentle reminder of the drudgery that had once marked her daily routine. Today, though, it felt different. Today was about legacy, the kind she wished to cultivate not just for herself, but for her colleagues who had banded with her against Dr. Stevens. Melissa grabbed a notepad from the small stack on the table, her fingers dancing across the clean white pages. What had begun as thoughts fueled by anxiety rapidly transformed into a purposeful action plan. She began taking notes, objectives, possible outcomes, and strategies to align their voices into a single, powerful thrust against the inertia of change. She paused, reflecting on the psychology behind their situation. Fear had been the primary weapon Dr. Stevens wielded. It was designed to divide and conquer, to keep them timid and compliant. But what if, instead of fear, they could cultivate confidence and courage within their team? They could channel their collective strength. The clock ticked ominously ahead, reminding her that their next meeting was looming near. She needed more than just her own resolve. She needed to galvanize her colleagues. They would have to confront the system Dr. Stevens represented, and to do that, she would need to reach out to each one personally. Clarity of purpose would be the glue that held them together in the inevitable firestorm to follow. Before she could second-guess herself, Melissa sent messages to the team, inviting them to an impromptu gathering at her apartment later that evening. It felt slightly impulsive, a decision fueled by an urgency she couldn't ignore, but deep down she knew it was essential. This moment needed to be about collaborative dialogue. Everyone should feel they had a stake in the coming challenge. As evening fell, she set the scene in her living room. Snacks arranged, chairs in a circle, air thick with anticipation. As her colleagues trickled in, she could sense the shared determination. The energy shifted from anxious tension to focused resolve as they settled into their seats. "Thank you for coming," Melissa began, standing before them. "I know we're all on edge about what's coming. Dr. Stevens made it clear he's not going to take our confrontation lightly. But I believe that we have an opportunity here to reframe this battle, to turn it from a struggle of personal agendas into a collective fight for what's best for our patients and each other." The group nodded, sensing the gravity in her words. They started sharing their own ideas, frustrations, and elevated aspirations. Each contribution wove together a tapestry of unity. With every shared concern, Melissa felt herself opening up, too, voicing her vulnerabilities and fears, yet countering them with a vision of strength. Let us identify what we need to communicate next and agree on a unified voice. We can galvanize our concerns compassionately yet resolutely. If we don't speak up, we cannot hope to be heard, she urged. It became a sharing of not just strategies but also personal experiences, stories that encapsulated their teamwork and reinforced the necessity of their shared battle. But with every ray of determination, shadows lurked. What if Dr. Stevens were to retaliate against someone professionally? Would some of her colleagues falter in strength? Melissa felt a gnawing anxiety knotting in her stomach. Despite her unease, she found solace in the shared passion alive in the room. As the meeting progressed, she recognized not just the strength within herself but the tenacity within each person gathered. They began crafting a detailed proposal, each section reflecting their shared values, data-driven arguments, and concrete Examples of patient care that needed improvement. As the clock advanced, so too did their commitment. Part of her longed for reassurance, for someone to tell them that everything would be alright, but deep down she knew this was their battle to fight, not just as individuals but as a cohesive entity. The energy shifted once more, morphing from nervous tension into a steely focus. They would not just echo their demands, they could transform them into the collective voice of authority. Melissa could almost hear the echoes of her group's solidarity as she concluded, "On Monday, we face Dr. Stevens again. We will not merely survive, we will thrive." However, as the evening wrapped up, a nagging realization settled within her. Melissa understood that every battle comes with sacrifices. As they prepared to step into that meeting, the thought raced through her mind: would they all be willing to risk their own careers to pursue this passion unrelentingly? As they left, Melissa found herself staring into the night sky, the weight of the moment settling on her. Would this newfound cohesion hold in the face of impending adversity? The answer loomed just around the corner, waiting for them in the scrutinizing glare of Dr. Stevens' office. The sun had barely risen when Melissa awoke, its soft light filtering through her window. With the world cloaked in quietude, a heavy dread settled in her chest as the memories of last night's gathering replayed in her mind. She could still hear the murmur of each shared dream and anxiety, and their rallying resolve seemed to grow louder. But now, the new day bore the weight of uncertainty that gnawed at her professional integrity. What if their united front crumbled? She forced herself to rise. There was no room for hesitation. This was the moment they had prepared for, the moment she had dared to hope would lead to a transformation in their workplace. She grabbed a cup of coffee, its warmth a small comfort against the chilling thoughts swirling in her mind. The stakes were high, but so was her resolve. As the clock inched closer to 9 a.m., Melissa donned her professional demeanor, the polished exterior she had relied on time and again to mask the internal turmoil. She slipped into her blazer, adjusting it as if it were armor. Today, she wouldn't just represent herself, she would stand for those who had placed their trust in her. Arriving at the office, she was met with a silence that felt oppressive. Colleagues exchanged quick glances filled with apprehension, their whispered conversations tinged with fear. Dr. Stevens was a formidable opponent, and each knew the game was about to get serious. Melissa squared her shoulders. It was time to transform anxiety into action. Gathering her team in the conference room, Melissa seized the opportunity to reinforce their strategy. "We each know what's at stake. We've prepared, and we're going to present a united front, not just today but moving forward," she asserted, her voice steady as she scrutinized each face. She could see the flickers of apprehension, the struggling resolve, but those crackles of doubt fueled her further. "Remember, every story we tell today is about our patients, our commitment to their care. That's our power." As she laid out their proposal for the meeting, she noticed several members of her team shifting in their chairs, their expressions ranging from nervousness to fire. She parted her lips to keep speaking, but just ahead lay the uncertainty of their impending confrontation. Would they hold up under Dr. Stevens' pressure? Minutes felt like hours until the meeting began. As they walked into the boardroom, Melissa led the way, pounding. Dr. Stevens sat as expected at the head of the table, exuding the confidence of someone who understood the stakes. With him were his allies, always ready to undercut any attempts at change. Melissa's grip tightened on the folder containing their meticulously crafted proposal. It was more than paper. It was a testament to their resolve, their fears transmuted into a cohesive argument that demanded respect. "Thank you all for coming," Dr. Stevens began, his eyes glinting with a practiced charm that veiled the challenge within. Each word felt like a chess piece moved, but Melissa centered herself. She would not allow him to dictate the terms of this game any longer. With a nod from her team, she launched into their presentation. As she spoke, words flowed, intertwining numerical data with real patient experiences that rendered their points immutable. Yet, she could feel the atmosphere shift. Dr. Stevens leaned forward, razor-focused, his demeanor fierce yet composed. When he finally interrupted, it was with calculated disdain. "It's admirable, Melissa, to champion teamwork. However, what you're proposing is simply impractical. Change cannot be an emotional decision. An ominous wave of tension swept through the room. Fear crept back into her heart, but it was met with defiance. She drew on the energy of her colleagues behind her. Change doesn't have to come from emotional decisions, it should stem from our unwavering commitment to patient care. What else impractical is to ignore the voices of those who are on the front lines. Every word felt heavier, yet also liberating. She realized the depths of her improvement as a leader. She was not merely defending a position but challenging the very roots of their workplace culture. As she pressed on, connecting the dots between patient rights and the team's morale, the feeling of unity became palpable. Dr. Stevens' posture shifted as he seemed taken aback, calculating his next move. The surrounding air crackled with fierce loyalty. Her colleagues shared glances projecting a mix of hope and fear. Then, a thought chilled her. What if there was a hidden agenda lurking behind Dr. Stevens' facade of calm, one that would undermine everything they built? As she finished her presentation, a feeling of clarity washed over her amidst that tension. Today was not merely about survival to her, it was about agency. When they spoke, they would not falter. They would reclaim their right to voice concerns about the care of their patients. But what unforeseen consequences would emerge from challenging Dr. Stevens' authority? As the meeting reached its climax, Melissa couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was brewing, one that would either galvanize or decimate their cause, leaving them clinging to their convictions. How far were they willing to go in this evolving conflict? The moment of truth lay just ahead, wrapped in layers of uncertainty. The stark fluorescent lights of the conference room flickered, casting harsh shadows on Melissa's face as she stepped into the aftermath of the meeting. The air was thick with tension, punctuated by whispers of disbelief and anxiety swirling around the table. Direct confrontation with Dr. Stevens lay behind them, but the remnants of his biting dismissal and condescending remarks hung heavy in the atmosphere. She could feel her heart racing, but there was something else, an ember of unshakable confidence igniting within her. "Did you see his face?" Amy breathed, a mix of admiration and disbelief in her tone. "I thought you were going to challenge him to a duel." Melissa couldn't help but let out a nervous laugh. "I was a little scared myself, but standing up today felt different. It wasn't just me, it was all of us." Her colleagues drew nearer, gathering in a tight circle around her. The palpable energy in the room shifted, morphing from hesitant to resolute. Each colleague reflected the growth Melissa had undertaken in the weeks leading to this moment, a growth steeped in newfound courage and responsibility. It was a pivotal shift from being confined by fear to becoming someone who inspired confidence in others. "Let us look at what we've just done," she said, her voice firm as she met their eyes. "This is more than just today, it's a start. We won't let his intimidation silence our voices." John stepped forward. "Melissa, your presentation laid out everything so clearly. You've mapped the path ahead beautifully. We need to keep the pressure on." The group nodded enthusiastically, their faith in one another reaffirmed. The giggles of fleeting fear had transformed into a shared commitment, one that breathed life into the notion of advocacy for their patients. "We need to solidify our plans," Melissa continued, her enthusiasm having overtaken her initial fear. "Our next steps must involve the truth we've uncovered and the strength we've nurtured." As discussions erupted among her colleagues about the best approaches to formalize their plan for action, Melissa felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was a collective that rejected fear, armed with resilience they had hardly acknowledged before. They were facing themselves, and with each nod and agreement, she recognized that their unity would become a foundation of strength. In the days that followed, she helped spearhead discussions that galvanized her team. With each meeting, they aligned their strategies, harnessing their individual experiences to draft proposals and cultivate a narrative that challenged Dr. Stevens' authority. They prepared to present again this time, not just the concerns they had but solutions that were actionable and grounded in research. As the team gathered together in preparation for the next meeting with the hospital's administration, Melissa looked around the room, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Confidence radiated among her, fueled by the hard work they'd put in together. "Today is not just about us, it's about those who trust us. We've worked hard, and it's time to show everyone that we are serious about change." Her colleagues' eyes gleamed with recognition. They were no longer passive observers but an active force for change, ready to confront whatever consequences the ever-looming Dr. Stevens might deliver. The next meeting was set with the administration, and with every passing hour, Melissa felt the excitement morph into deep-seated confidence. She was not just emerging as a leader but proving her capability to challenge ongoing injustices within the healthcare system. The once overwhelming fears had begun to dissipate, replaced by a fierce determination to advocate for her patients and colleagues alike. And no longer shackled by doubt, Melissa entered the meeting room afresh, a powerful sense of purpose propelling her steps forward. The discussions that followed echoed their robust preparation, and with every word she uttered, she solidified her place as a competent advocate, her authority ironically recognized through embracing vulnerability. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the culture within the department began to shift. Staff came forward to support the collective movement for change with each passing confrontation and proposals sent to the administration. They were no longer buried in silence. They were claiming their voice with substance and recognition. There were moments of pushback from Dr. Stevens and the administration, but each challenge was met with resilience and camaraderie. Melissa had achieved more than she'd ever imagined, each small victory reinforcing bonds within her team and cultivating unwavering solidarity. Then, one afternoon, while wrapped in the warmth of accomplishment, the hospital administrators called Melissa into their office for a meeting. As she entered, she was met with expressions that combined uncertainty and recognition. After reviewing your proposals and the supportive feedback from the nursing staff, one administrator spoke, lockstepping with the others. We've decided to move forward with your plans for improved patient care and staffing measures. It's clear that your advocacy has resonated significantly. We appreciate your efforts. In that moment, Melissa felt her heart soar. She had achieved something remarkable. She hadn't just raised her voice. She had translated doubt into constructive action and true impact. As she looked around the room, she saw nodding heads of her colleagues reflected in their shared triumph. They had confronted authority, dismantled intimidation, and rewritten their career narrative together. Outside, the sun set, casting a warm glow against the hospital walls, illuminating a new beginning for her colleagues, and most importantly, for the patients they served. Melissa had emerged not only as a force for change, but also as an accomplished advocate confident in her role within the ever-evolving landscape of healthcare. This was not the end. This was only the beginning of her professional journey, a reaffirmation of purpose that resonated deeply through the lives they would continue to change. And so she emerged, fulfilled and transformed, a leader not just of others, but of herself. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.